you know there's a problem when every Democrat you encounter has their eyes glazed over and is like simultaneously engaged in vigorous hand rubbing, like as a result of the very real reality now that their entire agenda, except for like abortion and poop dick, has now been canonized by Pope Francis, or at least by the media. I mean, did you notice that, Halberstram? Like, you know, everybody's excited and pumped up about this guy, but especially the Democratic Party.
Yeah, his agenda. Look, I mean, I definitely have noticed that, you know, the areas where he is in conflict with the modern left, you know, he speaks pretty quietly, and these are, of course, things like, don't be a get married and have children. Don't be a whore and abort your child.
Don't be a Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but like on all those.
You hear me, you fucking
Yes.
You hear me, you fucking
yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, he's not changing church doctrine on those things, but he doesn't, you know, he either speaks very quietly or he, like, really doesn't address those things at all when he can. I mean, the things, you know, the things that you can fucking count on this dude to talk about are global warming and fucking migrants.
Yeah.
I mean, here's
and economics as well. He likes to get into that.
Yeah.
In terms of like the poor and that stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we need to let the migrants in, because they're fucking poor.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Here's my theory on this dude. Like, I wrote up a little blurb about just sort of what I think about this guy. So, it's no secret that these days the church is experiencing the vast majority of its growth in brown countries. Not only in brown countries, but I read in a New York Times article, you know, in the run-up to his visit, that the majority of the Catholic Church's growth in this country, and I'm probably in other white countries, is from new brown people or growing communities of brown people. So if he wants to shift the focus, if the Catholic Church under Pope Francis wants to shift its focus to those countries, I'm not going to fault them, but, you know, don't expect me to go along with it. I'm concerned that his vision for the Catholic Church is something like the UN, but with religion. And by that I mean an organization through which SJWs and non-whites attempt to extract resources from first world, read white countries. And I really think that that's why he talks about fucking global warming, climate change so much, because that's how the UN rolls. Their position is like, we need to engage in massive, you know, global transfers of wealth because climate change, and industrialized nations owe all these fucking shitbird fucking countries, you know, that don't have anything, like.
Yeah, it's rent seeking from brown people.
Yeah, and I really think that that's why he fucking talks about it so much.
Yeah, well, and I was going to get into this here a little bit. It's the politicization of the Catholic Church. And again, for people who are just tuning in, you know, Halberstram and I are both like lapsed Catholics. I mean, but we are Catholic, and we do know a lot about the church. So I know it definitely rustles my jimmies whenever I hear like non-Catholics and non-whites and people who are non-white and non-Catholic talking about the church. But we know a little bit about it, and I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, and you know, like whether we want to, you know, whether he wants to admit it or not. The Pope Francis is definitely a leftist, like you were saying. And one of the guys on Twitter this week was saying that he hasn't said anything further to the left than any pope since John the 23rd. John the 23rd was around in the late 50s and early 60s, which was a very paused time in the United States, starting to be. But prior to being Pope, he was known for being a major help to the Jews during the Holocaust. He is also known for calling together the Second Vatican Council. And for those of you who are not Catholic, the Second Vatican Council followed the First Vatican Council, which took place in the 1800s. Prior to that, there had not been any kind of council brought together to discuss changing, the shape, the context, and the direction of the Catholic Church. But both councils were aimed at modernizing, quote-unquote, liberalizing the Church. And Pope John the 23rd signaled, quite literally, that he would convene the Second Vatican Council only 3 months after being elected Pope. So he had in mind what he wanted to do. But that's part of the problem. You can't take an institution that's been around for almost 2,000 years and crack open its time-tested set of rules and traditions and then begin aligning them with contemporary ideology. When you do that, you set a precedent for meddling. And to parallel our American system of government, that's why I've always been I've always preferred outright revolution over calling together a constitutional convention. Because unless you called to order that convention with a dream Congress, and by that I mean basically the SS, you set a precedent of meddling that opens up very settled traditions out and brings them out into the acrid, polluted air of modernity that's been created by cultural Marxism. So back to the Pope, they want to politicize the Catholic Church, and I just kind of want to point out, and most of us know this already, that the media and politicians on the left have been kind of playing sort of an agree and amplify role with the Pope. But it's been a little bit more than agree and amplify. They've been kind of twisting some of the things he said, and I'm not defending Pope Francis, but I did want to go on record saying this. And there have been a few articles this week that I stumbled across that compare his native language side by side with English translations. Those English translations are the headlines that you read on like CNN and the other dildo fucking media outlets. And I'll just give two examples. The first of which is the who am I, and this is what you were talking about, Halberstram, like he's more quiet on the gay rights stuff. But his quote, everybody, I'm sure, probably most people, are familiar with this who am I to judge thing that the Pope said, as if that's like, that's all he said. Well, he said, who am I to judge if you're living within the faith and teachings of the Catholic Church? That takes on an entirely different meaning than who am I to judge. Who am I to judge is as simple as saying, well, I don't care what they do, but that's not what he said. And so that's an example of something the Pope disagrees with the left on, but they change it so that he's more palatable to the larger group of people. The other example is trickle-down economics. Now, this one I'm not going to quibble with too much, but the left, the media played this as the Pope throwing trickle-down economics under the bus. He was saying that it's an inevitability that it has to be, something else has to take its place. Well, that's not what he said. He said it's inevitable that you have to do things in addition to trickle-down economics, and he means helping the poor, et cetera, et cetera. But he still is shitting all over capitalism. And that might even be somewhat understandable from the perspective of the guy's never actually lived in a country that practices legitimate capitalism. True capitalism outside of the United States, or at least what passes for it, especially in Argentina, and most of Europe, is just a corrupt racket that benefits, a few shiesty people, and you know who those, shiesty fucking people are.
You motherfucker, you!
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, if you can't, your personal experience, like where you live, like, I mean, the guy is supposedly a fucking educated guy. If you can't look at the two systems and see that one is objectively better, well, it might have some problems. And these problems are usually when it's taken to extremes by fucking Shlomo Goldstein or people who at the very least think like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, he doesn't understand the system. And when you look at it from the perspective of capitalism has done more for the poor in bringing more people out of destitution and putting them into a system where they're able to be prosperous. I mean, you want to talk about social justice. I've mentioned this before. You had Obama in 2008 talking about change and what's fair and all this shit. But you look at the poorest people in this fucking country, and they have a TV, maybe 2 TVs, a car or 2. They have a house, they have a microwave, they have a refrigerator, they have heating and air conditioning. They're living a very nice lifestyle. But yet those people are the ones that are being oppressed, and everything's so terrible for them. But the Pope is trying to open the floodgates into countries where we have everything, so that the vast majority of people end up with very little.
It's about. I mean, capitalism definitely lifts everyone's standard of living and quality of life, but we know that that's not how the left operates. It's about. I mean, and they actually have a term for it now. It's fucking relative poverty. It's about fucking.
Relative poverty. Oh my god, dude.
It's about what dude over there has and fucking I don't have. It's the same shit. Just fucking trying to agitate fucking envious proles to serve your fucking political ends.
He's so, the Pope kind of comes across as being this sort of humble guy, and he kind of feigns this sort of simplistic mindset about a complex world. But this is the thing. Let's just say for a second that, he's being taken out of context. He's being mischaracterized. This isn't really what he means. Rush Limbaugh calls him a leftist, and then all of a sudden, he says, I'm not a leftist. And then the media reports that he says he is kind of a leftist. It's all a bunch of fucking lies. But here's the biggest thing is, say what you want about, the Pope and everybody else. He's allowing himself to be co-opted by these people. And if you want to call that a leadership style, I'm going to stop you and say he knows what's going on. He's not standing up and saying, this is not what I believe. He's letting Barack Obama and these other schlubs fucking drive the conversation. And instead of, standing up and says, no, guys, that's not what I'm about. He doesn't do that. He just kind of leans back and basks in the sunlight and uses his position to signal just as hard as any other SJW. So.
Yeah, I don't understand why the head of any organized Christian church or denomination or whatever would want to alienate the people who are most likely to be their followers and get in bed with the left. The only thing that I can think of is favorable media coverage, because I'll tell you what, he does have that. I mean, he's on the fucking tube. He's on the tube fucking everywhere, all day, all week, this week.